to talk about mental health and ideas for parents and kids. My name is Ken Hubley, host of Parent Chats and author of the Lenny Superbook and Autograph of Heroes. I am so excited today to welcome my friend Dr. Bruce Dick, PhD, Chief of Psychology, Multidisciplinary Pain Center, and Professor of Faculties of the Medicine of University of Alberta. More importantly, a father of 4 adult children and a fellow Oiler fan. Welcome, Bruce. Thank you for coming to talk to us.
Thanks, Ken. It's great to be with you, and I'm honored to be here tonight. Happy to be able to speak with you and with your audience.
Excellent. Fun fact, Bruce wrote the foreword in my first book, The Lenny Superbook. You can get the Lenny Superbook at Amazon. Mental health is so important and precious. It's a topic the parents need support with, and we all need to discuss it. I hear so many parents saying there's so little support, so I'm excited to hear your thoughts, Bruce, tonight. Parents need to support their families and to find balance for self-care for themselves as well. Such a vast topic. My first question to you is, parenting is rewarding, but with so many demands on all of us, like work, family commitments, and community life, it can be challenging. What advice do you have for parents trying to find a balance to meet their commitments, raise their children, and find some time for self-care?
Thanks, Ken. So I'll try to answer that, and I have a few ideas and some suggestions, both as a parent and as a professional. I have the good fortune of working with people both in the hospital and in the community, and have learned a lot from good people over the years. So I think one of the key things is you talk, Ken, about finding balance. And I think one of the ways that we can be guided, each of us as individuals and as parents, is to have a very clear hold on what our priorities are. We talk a lot with families about understanding our values and making sure that we live our lives with what we call a value-oriented approach. There are many ways to do this, different exercises even that we do, but I think for many parents, it could be as simple as sitting down on your own or with your partner and brainstorm what's most important in our lives. There's another principle related to that we share with parents. We call it the 3 Ps. It's not our idea. We've borrowed it from other good people, but it's about prioritizing. So recognizing what your values are, making a plan. So taking those values and those priorities and guiding you in your day-to-day life, the boring things of life and the exciting, fun things of life with parenting, and then pacing yourself. So recognizing that as a parent, it's a lifelong commitment and that it's a long-term commitment. We aren't necessarily going to have a lot of earth-shattering 30-minute TV episode exchanges with our kids. It's the process of living and working together over a lifetime. As you think about that first P, the priorities, and doing a values exercise, we want to think about what's really, really important. Now, that'll vary based on our circumstances, based on our needs. There would be some people who will spend a great deal of time just trying to make ends meet. And for those people, I don't think there should be any guilt around not being able to do more. I think you do what you do as a parent. Other people will have more resources and feel compelled to provide more entertainment for their kids or more fun. Do you know what's interesting? If you ask people, as I speak with my patients, both adults and kids, about what they remember about their experiences with their parents, it's interesting what kids remember. And sometimes it's the most simple, benign things that a parent would never even think of. Some of the great sermons that parents have are shared in 2 or 3 seconds, sometimes at a meaningful moment. So be careful that we don't try to be too grandiose as parents. Be solid. Make sure, again, that your values guide you. I think we also have to be careful, depending on our circumstances, that we don't rob our kids of experiences and motivations sometimes by maybe giving them too much or focusing too much on stuff, right? I think so much of what's important as we parent is that our values guide us to help kids have experiences that help them to grow. And again, as I said before, don't regret it if you're working hard just to make ends meet. So that's one category area as we think about where we might want to go. The second area in response to this question, Ken, that I'd suggest is is we also have to make sure that we're well. I know you've done some work with other guest speakers previously this year that talks about being healthy, and it's very difficult to be effective as parents if we're not well ourselves in our own physical health and in our own mental health. Now, sometimes when parents hear this, they think that we're suggesting they be self-indulgent or lazy or selfish. That's not what I mean at all. This is about being compassionate toward yourself. And there's been some great work by some psychologists, Kristen Neff and Chris Germer have done some great work on self-compassion. Those might be resources people might look at as parents. But one of the things we have to do as parents is we need to model that. We want our kids to be well. We want them to be healthy. We want them to be kind to themselves. We have to model that same behavior as well. That would be a start. But I think as we think about our priorities and then we try to be healthy ourselves, those can be two sort of guiding lights that we might follow.
Wow, thank you, Bruce. Priorities and wellness. Can you sum up 2022, 2023 any more clearly if you needed to sum it in 2 words than that? You were so correct. Thank you. Kids are facing major challenges, especially when social media is so prevalent. Could you please provide some tips for parents to discuss challenges around social media with their kids and how to deal with some of these pressures, especially where they don't, we didn't grow up with social media, not like today.
I agree. That's a great point and an excellent question, Ken. I think that's one of the major challenges that we face as parents is that our children are being shaped socially by a mechanism that is both really exciting and brings the world together, allows us great opportunities to be connected and to learn, but also in a way that's a little bit frightening and a bit overwhelming, not just for us as parents, but for our kids. You know, human beings have developed over the last 2 million years, over thousands and thousands and thousands of generations. We've been socialized through those generations to be a group, to be together, to learn from people in the same room side by side. Social media completely changes that paradigm. I don't think social media is fundamentally bad in and of itself, but I think we have to be very aware of what social media is about, and some of the motivations behind the organizations. Again, I'm not speaking to sort of pure evil here. It's been vilified sometimes. But there are a few things at stake here. Number one is simply screen time in and of itself. We know that large amounts of screen time are not healthy for our brains, any brain, but in particular, perhaps for the developing brain as well. Excuse me, just. And so we have to be very cognizant of how much time we're all spending on our screens, and perhaps most importantly, how much time our kids are spending. And the Canadian Pediatric Society has some very clear guidelines that can be found. Maybe I can send that to you later, Ken, and you can post it on your site in
For
terms
sure.
of the amount of screen time that's recommended at each stage of life. And believe it or not, there are even guidelines for infants and toddlers. Uh, that makes me shake my head a little bit that we have to talk about that, but there are.
Yeah.
So we need to think about that, how it affects the brain. But the other bigger piece that I think is so important is that humans are fundamentally social creatures. And we're going to be drawn to opportunities to see other people, to learn from them. We're prone to compare ourselves to them for the better or for the worse. And sometimes those can be drivers of problems with mental health. Now, I'm not going to sit here and criticize social media or those who put it together, because again, there are some good things about social media. But I think it really behooves us all as parents to have conversations with our kids about social media, what it does to us, what the expectations are, the amount of motivation behind social media, clickbait, um, modified images, people only looking their best sometimes, as well as some of the issues with cyberbullying and the cruelties that happen online. Because people behave very differently in many cases behind a computer screen than they would if they were in the same room as you are. So have those conversations. The number one thing I would say is watch how much time that your kids are spending on the screens. Have conversations about safe use of social media and healthy use of social media, and regularly check in with them. Be a part of your kids' lives. Ask them what they're looking at, what they're learning from. Don't be threatened by it. You know, your kids are going to be highly motivated to be engaged, so be a part of their lives. There may be times when you need to restrict that or give them some guidance, but but be a part of that experience for them and teach them. You might learn some good things as well as you do that.
Awesome, that's great, and thank you. Yes, those guides for the screen time, we'll definitely put them in the comments below. And when you speak about the conversations, it always amazes me, because a lot of what I write about is about building that foundation of conversations with your kids, and I would say almost every guest, it comes back to conversations in one way or another. So it's amazing how important that is. Thank you, Bruce. As a psychologist, what are some of the major pressures you see that both parents and children are facing, and what tips can you provide to the parents?
Yeah, thanks, Ken. Another great question. You know, it's interesting. We talked before about social media and how that is fundamentally changing many people's life experiences in many ways. And I think the world is changing. Society is changing and growing at a speed that is that our species as people, as humans, that we can't keep up with. So it's a fast, demanding world. And I think that technology is incredibly exciting and it brings so many good things into our lives. And at the same time, I think we need to sit back and think a little bit about how we engage with technology and what some of the implications of technology are. It's made, globalization has brought some great things into the world, and it may bring some challenges as well. It does bring some challenges as well. And in a competitive world, globally, nationally, in our provinces, in our towns, and in our communities, there's a lot at stake. And I'll tell you, as I work with kids in clinics, I am hearing all the time how much pressure they feel to perform, to achieve. There's a certain measure of feeling overwhelmed with how quickly the world is changing, recognizing that their parents' generation, our generation, lived in a different world, and and that as quickly as things are changing, they're not sure if they have the skills that they need to keep pace. I think that they do, and I think that they can, but I hear, I think, increasing amounts of loneliness, that while people may have hundreds of followers on their social media, they're utterly alone and spend very little time with friends in truly meaningful ways. I think that hopelessness and having difficulty finding meaning, and with that depersonalization, has become an increasing problem. I think never more so in my career. I've had the good fortune of working with young people now for coming on 30 years in different capacities. And I've never heard more kids come in and talk about feeling depersonalized, experiencing derealization, and not feeling connected than I ever before during these last almost 3 years now with pandemic. But I think this was coming before pandemic. It was happening in quieter ways and more insidious ways. Anyway, going back to the earlier point, there's a tremendous amount of pressure on our kids to keep up in a competitive world. And sometimes that leads to quiet anxieties, and sometimes it leads to very significant, complex anxieties. Um, Separately, as we hear all the time that we're post-pandemic, even though we're still in a pandemic, but as we transition to a different phase of the pandemic, while we're in the midst of this, there are all kinds of transitions and changes, and many of our children and the children in society have just had 3 years of very different social connectedness or lack thereof. Now, for you and me, us old guys, 2 or 3 years doesn't feel like very much, but to a 12-year-old, 2 or 3 years is a very, very long time, even to a 16-year-old. And so we need to think about that in the context of living in a society that probably already had some significant difficulties pre-pandemic. We're now coming out of it, and we're seeing many of those things amplified. I like human beings, and I feel very grateful to live on the planet now and to live where I live. I'm not a pessimistic person by nature, but I do think that there are some very concerning things that as parents we need to be aware of ourselves. We need to talk with our kids about these things, and and what that means is ask them a question and listen a lot. It's not about having a sermon. It's about ask a question, have a prompt, and let the kids talk. Don't feel compelled, at least at the beginning for sure, to give them any messages or teaching. Just let them talk. That teaching may come later when they've said their piece.
Wow, that's so wise and so true. I'm thankful that there's colleagues, you and your colleagues, that are out there to help, to listen, and to give support. But one problem I hear so much is that there's a high demand for mental health assistance, but limited resources available. Do you have any suggestions or ideas for what parents can do as they wait for support for themselves or their children?
Yeah, thanks, Ken. We live at a time that in some ways is absolutely wonderful in terms of identifying mental health. We talk about the rates of mental health rising, and they have been partly because they are, and partly because we're recognizing them more and we're better able to talk about them. So it's a wonderful thing to live at a time where mental illness is being recognized. There are good treatments available for many things and many resources available. We also live at a time because of population growth, because of economic constraints, the tremendous, spectacular cost of the Canadian healthcare system, where we have to recognize that we will never completely meet the demands that are there. Um, and that's, again, that's not pessimistic. That's just how things are. So the key for all of us is how do we maximize in a sort of a stepped care approach, getting people the help that they need. Now, there are some great community mental health resources and hospital resources for people with extreme need, and there are pathways in working with your family doctor, community mental health, to access those things. There are sort of step down programs that offer education and treatment and support. And there are many, many, many good ones. I think about, and I'm going to speak mostly about maritime programs, having had the really good fortune of living and being trained in the Maritimes earlier in my life. And so there are programs like the Stronger Families program that has come out of the Maritimes. It's an outstanding program that I believe is, I know is national for sure, but also I believe is internationally used, certainly in the United States, I'm aware of. This is a program for people who have significant clinical needs, um, maybe mild to moderate needs in some cases, but that offers great supports, great education. They have there's a website available for that program, and it's outstanding. I've done a little bit of work in anticipation of our conversation tonight, just looking across Canada at different resources, and there are some great web-based approaches as well. Um, and all kinds of things from managing mental health to fostering healthier lifestyles, improving physical activity, sleep management programs, nutritional programs, all kinds of great things. Another category is excellent self-care and self-help resources. So Ken, your book series is outstanding, and it was a
Thank
privilege
you.
really to be able to review it and write that review as you mentioned in your first book. I think finding gems like that, whether it's at your local bookstore, through online searches, or whatever that might be, can be really, really helpful. For many problems of daily living, we don't need professionals. We need friends, right? We need mentors and wise people in our lives, good neighbors, good people. Obviously, we need our parents as much as possible. We as parents, I didn't have a manual when my kids were born. I'm grateful for my good parents and what they taught me. And but for most of us, we have to learn on the fly. Don't be afraid of doing that. Ask your friends for good resources. Search around online. There are some great things available out there. And remember that there are various steps and varying levels of need. And as difficult as it is, I do think that there are many great people in Canada, such as the folks who put together the Stronger Families program, who have done great things to help people locally and more broadly than that. That's just a starter. But,
Thank you. Yeah, and what an inspiring message and true. So thank you for sharing that. You've already given us a lot of encouragement, but my last question is, what encouraging parent message do you have for us as we just before we sign off? What can you leave us with?
yeah. Yeah, for sure. There are a few things. I had a lot of fun thinking about this over this last while, and I have a few ideas. Just again from my own experience, been and in many cases from good people that I've had the chance to learn from as I work from them in clinics. So one thing that I would say is remember that as we are parents, we need to play the long game. And so while moment by moment experiences will benefit our kids and we can have a profound impact in 2 or 3 seconds, much of what's done by parents is done over a long period of time. And so thankfully most of us aren't going to completely ruin our kids through our clumsy, you know, uneducated approaches as we work with our kids when they're little and as we get older. The key for all of us as parents is to be learners, to be lifelong learners in terms of how to benefit and love our kids. My kids are all adults now, and I enjoy being with them. I loved it when they were little. I thoroughly enjoy the elementary years. I like them as teenagers, and I'm looking forward to watching my kids if I'm fortunate enough to get older. And at each stage, there are things for us to learn and things that we need to tweak and change. And I think that there are good things ahead if we're open to be learners. Now, there's another thing that I would say just about the planet generally. We've talked about social media. We've talked about some of the pressures our kids face in a competitive world. I hear a lot of people talking about how the world and society are, going downward in a handbasket, so to speak. And what if this is just what people are? What if this is just a reflection and we're more aware of things? And maybe more importantly, what if we can make a difference? Most importantly, maybe in our own homes, but also in our communities. So I think it's very easy to feel hopeless and to feel discouraged by what we see. Absolutely. But remember that what you see on the news at night is about the small handful of people who did remarkably bad things that day. What you didn't see was all of the people who did love their kids that day, and all of the people who did good things to their neighbors that day, and the good that's happening in the world. There's some serious problems in the world, but I think that as parents, we have an opportunity to affect real change for a very, very long time as we interact with our kids. So think about that, and as you greet the day on a day-to-day basis, look forward to that and what you might do. Again, another thing would be that I think as psychologists, one of the things that we do badly is we often spend a lot of time focusing on what's wrong in life as our clients and patients come in the door. I think we can do the same thing with our kids. We can focus on all the things they do wrong. I think it would be helpful for us to focus on what we call a strength-based approach. So, what are our kids doing right? What's going right today, and what can we help build on? And make sure that our kids know what their strengths are. I'm not talking about blowing sunshine at our kids. I'm going to come to that a little bit later. But I do think that there's a lot that can be done for just recognizing something good that our kids do, or the children in our lives in various capacities. Each of our homes is a part of the broader society, and the things that we do within those walls can make a really big difference. And then we can watch how that spreads as people pay it forward. I'm going to leave you with something that I've learned. Being a parent now, our oldest daughter just turned 28 on Saturday, and things I've learned during that period of time, and things that I've learned in the clinics and from good mentors and good teachers that are helpful with parenting. I think more than anything, I think we can and should share with our kids unconditional love and unconditional positive regard, even when we don't like what they do, and some days maybe not liking them very much and being around them. That's okay. That's welcome to being human, right? And I think if our kids know that, that will have a massive impact on some of the other suggestions that I have. Number two is paying attention to them. We're busy, we're all stretched, and we're all trying to give our kids as much as we can. Again, be careful in the process of trying to give your kids a better life than you had, that you're going to rob them of the things that you learned and did because you didn't have some of the things that they have. So spend time with them. Not necessarily, it's a balance between quantity of time and quality of time. Focus on both of them because they're both important. But don't forget that the greatest thing you can do for your kids is pay attention to them and catch them being good, recognize the good things that they do. Number three, structure, expectations. I think one of the worst things that we can do for our kids is just to let them roam freely, completely without any kind of direction. So give them directions, have expectations, make those expectations clear and fair and consistent and in line with where their development is at their current ages and stages of development. Consequences are important. We can give them consistently. Remember, catch them being good, and recognizing the good things that your kids do will be more important even than catching them with the things that are wrong, that sort of horrify us and make us think that we failed our children, because there will be times where we will. Sometimes those consequences have to be firm. Don't be afraid to do that. Care about them enough to make them upset sometimes, but make sure that there's an extra measure of recognizing what they do well. Um, that those corrections and those consequences are very different from criticism. And be careful of chronic nagging and criticism, because that will also cause them to tune us out. maybe finally have fun with your kids. Look at your life with them as an adventure rather than a chore, and enjoy the time, because I'll tell you, it goes far too quickly.
Thank you, Bruce, for this time with you. I'm very grateful for our friendship and our discussion. This has been an excellent show tonight. Thank you to our audience members, and I plead with you, if you need to talk to someone, please reach out. Either a friend, a professional, there's always someone who wants to listen and wants to help. This is such an important topic. Please share this show with your friends, show on your social media. Let's get the conversation of mental wellness out in the airwaves. Please join us for more engaging shows designed to help parents on the journey we are on. We are parents helping parents. Please put one parenting tip in the comments to help other parents. And as I always like to say, my hood is parenthood. Take care until next time, everyone.